Hello and welcome to Pickles Garage. Today we are working on the 1993 Z28 Camaro. Specifically, I'm going to be working on something that's a little bit more universal to many people, many different projects, but I have a bolt down there on the exhaust manifold. Oh, on my, right there. See that? That's broken off right next to that O2 sensor. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using a tool that you can find online. It is a stud bolt extractor for specifically removing broken off bolts. And so broke off when I was trying to work on some other projects, dropped the oil pan, and so now I need to go ahead and get that removed. I could probably do it from up underneath, but I think I have multiple that are broken. It's just going to be kind of clunky, so I'm actually going to try and remove this from the vehicle entirely. That way you guys will get a better view as well. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and remove this exhaust manifold. If you have this exact specific problem, I will kind of glance over some of the details, but for the most part, this is just a general removal of studs and how to use this tool and its review. So let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, well, welcome back. It's been about a week and a half since I started the removal of this. It fought me at every possible turn. I couldn't get the O2 sensor off, which later caused me issues because then I couldn't get it around the dipstick. Tried to remove the dipstick was stuck. So that was its own issue. Even after I removed the bolt, it just wouldn't pull straight up because the manifold was in the way. This started galling up, and so I couldn't actually remove it, so I had to get the pipe so that I can later repair it. So I had to take the alternator out. It was a mess. So if you are removing this specific thing on the passenger side, the driver's side looks like a dream compared to this, but on the passenger side, it's a little rough. So naturally, it's got your bolts that you need to address, but you also have to remove this. Hopefully yours isn't super stuck like mine. I would recommend pulling the dipstick. If yours comes straight up, I don't think you'll have the same issues that I did. If your O2 sensor comes off like mine did not, then I don't think you'll have the same issues. But again, this is a universal video about removing these studs. So let's get right back to that. So as you can see, I have 3 here. This one was probably usable again, but I'm going to go ahead and remove it entirely just because it looks like a nightmare that's going to be an issue later down the road anyways, so might as well get rid of it. So first thing is I'm going to go ahead and throw this in a vise. That'll make it a little easier for me to go ahead and maneuver it and remove some of these. I'm also going to start with some additives to start dissolving the rust, and I'll show you what I use. So if you were keeping on the vehicle, you could probably skip this step, but if you take it off, like I said, you'll want to have a vise. I would put some wood around it if you care about it. Otherwise, you can tighten it straight up. Now, the additives that we're going to be looking into here is we have this blaster, we have a Rust-Oleum rust dissolver, we have freeze-off super penetrant, and then there's classic WD-40. Now, I bought this thinking this was going to absolutely change the game for me. Either I haven't really used it on anything that's really been able to stand out on, or it's not as great as I thought it would be, but I haven't had a whole lot of like, wow, this totally saved the day. And so I'm going to continue to use this, but so far I haven't been necessarily dazzled by it. The freeze off, same kind of situation. I think there's plenty of scenarios where it could work, but it just doesn't really seem to do what I need to do. It freezes and cracks rust, and so often when I use it, it just breaks whatever it is that I was using. And so, granted, if you're trying to absolutely break a nut off or something like that, then this is probably going to work just fine, but that wouldn't necessarily be the situation that we have today, but I will have it handy. WD-40, I think that's more about loosening a pretty solid bolt, but if it's one that is deteriorating, it's probably not going to be your friend. Now, the greatest thing I've ever used as far as rust is relating to is going to be this Rust-Oleum rust dissolver. Now, pros and cons with it. It works absolutely amazingly, completely eliminates rust. It, breaks everything loose that I've ever sprayed it on, but it does soften the metal a little bit. And so again, in a situation like this, that's kind of perfect where I want it to be a little soft, but I also don't want what I'm gripping onto to be so soft that it doesn't work. So what I'm going to do, and I'll be able to kind of show you in real time if it works or not, is I'm going to clean up the area a little bit. I'm going to do the rust dissolver, 15-30 minutes. You got to let it sit, clean it off, and then I'll probably use one of these other products to actually spray on it last before I start moving it. So let me go ahead and dive into that. All right, so as I mentioned, it's going to sit there for about 15-30 minutes. It bubbles up. You're not supposed to let it dry, so just reapply or wipe it off if it starts to. And then it's got a pretty distinct smell when it's working. So it's gotten underneath, which is great. And so it should be breaking loose a little bit. You'll notice I didn't spray it on the top because, like I said, I don't want this to get soft because that's what I'm going to be gripping onto. This one's probably going to be the more challenging of the three, but next scene you should start to see the removal here. All right, so I went ahead and hit it with our PB penetrating. So I hit these two. I'm going to come back to that one because I might do the freeze on that one. But here is the tool. So essentially what it does is, as you tighten, let's see if I can focus on this. So as you loosen it, rather, so as this is turning counterclockwise, this is actually coming in and gripping. And so the more you loosen the top, the tighter the grip is. And so the idea is naturally that it will go ahead and grab that stud, and then you'll be able to back it all the way off. So that is the idea of the tool. This comes in handy later. Honestly, I didn't even have a wrench big enough for this, so worst case scenario, I'll just go ahead and put it in a vise. But luckily, this top has space for a ratchet. I don't have the size of this. I'll grab that here in a little while, but I'm going to go ahead and use a ratchet. Normally, like if I was recommending someone else doing this, I would say it's best to use a breaker bar. That way you don't break your ratchet. But I have a long ratchet, and I want to kind of show this is working or not. So I will be a little disappointed if I break that, but I went ahead and started it. I got a fair amount of teeth on it, but I wanted to show this twisting at the bottom for you guys. So we'll go ahead and pop this in. We'll start twisting. So I imagine this would be kind of helping hold it in place if it was having a hard time getting a grip. But like I said, unfortunately, I don't really have a wrench that's big enough for that. I'll give you a better angle here. So hopefully this works. So I'm going to go nice and slow because actually this is getting tighter and tighter, but it could start breaking the tool instead of pulling the studs. And at this point, I'm actually getting a little concerned that it's not doing what I need it to do because I'm putting quite a bit of force on it and that stud isn't going absolutely anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and try the freeze product. So hopefully that persuades it a little bit more. But I gotta say, this probably has a good 2 or 3 more turns, I think, before the tool breaks. So unless I start seeing some serious action here, I think this tool is going to be a bust. Yeah. All right, let me study it a little bit and see if I could see anything that might help. Otherwise, this might be a rather short video on this review, unfortunately. All right, so here's the thing with this. I know some of you might be looking at it like, oh, well, obviously you're just supposed to use a wrench for this portion, and that's where you actually get your torque on. But the thing is, one, I don't really have a size large enough for that, and I have huge wrenches, so this is an absolutely massive size. But I could put some vice grips on it. If you look, let's see if I can do this while holding it. But if you look, the entire thing is now turning. The stud is not moving. Right? So even if I'm using what would be a tool right there, it's still not enough to get good grip on it. And like I said, I can tell, you can usually tell when you're about to break something like a tool. I can tell. This probably has 3 or 4 more degrees in it before I start breaking it. So it's getting a little unfortunate here. So I hate ending a video without some sort of resolution. This could just be an extremely tough one that I'm gonna have to find another solution for. So I'm gonna try and reset up here. And if I can't do any of that, I am gonna try and leave you with some advice if you're in a similar situation. But so far, this tool, I can only see it working on very, very basic sort of broken studs, like where you literally just can't get a grip on it. Like maybe it breaks, but it's only because you can't get a good grip on it. That's the only reason it's not twisting off. Maybe this tool would work. But if you broke a bolt because it was really stuck in there, I don't think this is going to be your answer. And then looking in the tool itself, you can see that it actually ground grooves into it. So essentially, the innards were just spinning around. And I know what maybe some of you are thinking too, like, oh, obviously that's like a welded in stud or something like that. But there's a reason why it's got a shape on the top. That's because these do come in and out. It's just they've been in there for a long time, and so that's the need for the tool. Because otherwise, if I try and go from the top, I think it'll break just like these other ones did too. So unfortunately, like I said, I think this tool is going to be for much milder applications, but so far it's not really doing what it was designed to do and what it was advertised to do. So I'm going to have to give it a low score. But like I said, I'm going to keep trying at it and try and leave you with a resolution here in a minute. All right, so we've entered turn it till it breaks territory. So that's what we're going to go for here. Hopefully it does something like it's supposed to. If it's too much, I'm going to go ahead and switch that breaker bar that I was mentioning, but naturally it's a little easier, a little faster, I should say. So it does feel as though it's gripping pretty well, because you'll see that this isn't turning at all, which is good, because again, that's why if you use the tool to try and turn this, I don't think it's going to get that bite you need. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a breaker bar so I don't break my ratchet. All right, so now we have our breaker bar, and if you have a pipe of sorts, you can always put it on the end, give yourself even more leverage. So I know some of you are thinking, why am I wasting my time trying to fix something so ugly? First of all, you've got a great personality. Second of all, if you have a 93, you know the pain I'm going through, because either I fix my own junk or I have to buy someone else's junk because for whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, they had a weird emissions thing this year that they decided to change for 94 and so on. And so you can get plenty of stuff 94 on, but 93 stuff you can't. So my options are to fix my own junk, fix someone else's junk, or for me to go ahead and replace it with some headers and get rid of all my emission stuff, which is not anything I'm opposed to, but there you go. So it broke. All right, so that actually improved my rating on it quite a bit, because it had every opportunity to fail and it just didn't. The bolt failed way before it did. It got to a point where I was cranking on it and I could feel that it was solid. If you look at the piece here and give it a background, you can see it was eating into it, and it doesn't seem like it was ever going to go anywhere. Those are deep, deep grooves that it pinched in on, and I don't see a whole lot of damage to the teeth. There's a little bit, so I'm sure you can only get maybe 5 to 10 really tough jobs out of it. Naturally, it didn't work for me. This vehicle was from up north, and it's possible that these were never going to pop out unless I hit them with fire and melted them a little bit. But I go back to, if you have a milder case, then I feel like this tool works perfectly for that. It had every opportunity to fail. It should have failed a lot of different points that I expected, and it just didn't. Kept on pushing. So that is impressive. Naturally, I galled it up a little bit trying to open it back up with the vice grips, getting this out. so it's going to get some damage with it. But the one thing I will say, anytime I mention anything with Amazon, is a lot of these tools people have one job for them. They'll use them, they'll ding them up like I just did, and then they'll go ahead and return it. And then the next one buying it is going to end up getting a damaged tool. So be cautious of that. That you might end up seeing a tool like this get all damaged in return. If you are one of those individuals, please don't send it back. You'll find another reason for it. Usually these are relatively cheap. It's really not worth it just to screw over the next guy. So please hang on to them, but be cautious if you are buying it. That sometimes people just say, "Oh, I didn't need it anymore," and it'll come to you all banged up. So overall, I would recommend it. I would say, like I said, you can kind of see it in my hand here. It is pretty bulky, so if you're going to try and use it within the vehicle still on something, you might have a hard time getting a whole lot of room. I'll get the measurement here in a second. So you go about 3 inches long, 2 inches wide, 15/16 for the top here. Overall, I think it did pretty well. The only con, like I said, because obviously if it's pretty bulky, it's going to be hard to have in the vehicle and maneuver that around and have various extensions. The other thing too is when I first started, I had it flush, and just as I was tightening it, it kind of pushed itself up, which gave it enough of a neck to break on. So I think if it was able to hold itself, it wouldn't have failed in the way that it did, but I don't know if there was any avoiding that with this. I should have just hit it with fire. So sorry that you don't really get to see a resolution of me removing these bolts. I'm just going to have to go ahead and replace this thing. But overall, I pushed this to the point of having something fail, and it wasn't the tool. So for nothing else, for 20 bucks, I would recommend that, just on something a little bit more of a mild case. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.